So my name is Sian Harris, and I work at the University of Bristol. I look after communications and engagement with the wider public. And so I work with a lot of researchers who are and members of the public who are going to be speaking with us today. So this webinar is for anyone who's interested in potentially being involved in helping to be part of and steer the direction of public health research. So our speakers today will be talking about some of the aspects of the work that we do and some of the ways that the public is involved. And we have a range of different speakers talking about some different projects and hopefully be springboards for some exciting and interesting conversations. So today we have five people speaking. So first of all, I'm going to hand over to Gareth, who's going to tell us a little bit about what epidemiology public health research is.
Hey everyone, that's me. I'm going to move the slide forward and hope that this works. Hey everyone, so I'm Gareth Griffith. I'm a researcher, a research fellow in the MRC Integrative Epidemiology unit in the medical school. And I'm just doing the intro bit because I'm a relatively recent convert to medicine and/or epidemiology. Prior to being in the medical school, I was a geographer. That's where I did my studies. I studied how where you live impacts your mental health. Then I moved to working between the medical school and the psychological school, and now I work exclusively in the medical school in the epidemiology unit, looking at how people's mental health affects their likelihood of taking part in studies, which involves a huge amount of what we're going to talk to you a little bit about today around PPI. So my qualification is largely that I only learned this stuff fairly recently, so it should be fresher in my mind than some of the very experienced, very smart people you're going to hear from later. So, what is epidemiology? At its core, epidemiology is largely the study of what makes groups of people healthy or sick. So, there are different ways we might go about this, but largely we want to understand which groups of people are becoming sick or are being more healthy in a given population. So um, it could be, say, younger people or groups of elderly folks are becoming more at risk of certain conditions. Whether it be the who, in the when, it could be that there are different time periods or different critical periods which are relevant for certain exposures for different types of condition. This ne next one is unsurprisingly my sort of penchant as a geographer is that I like the where. That's what I've studied historically. Why different people in different places are more or less healthy or sick, and ultimately we want to know why. So all of these things are governing or are governed by this idea that we want to know why people are becoming sick or why certain people are healthy, with the idea that we can design an intervention or we could design a way which would improve people's health. So how might we go about this? There are a lot of different ways. So I was once, when I first joined the medical school, someone once said to me, epidemiologists are like disease detectives, which I think is arrogant, but also is quite, I would say it's not, if it's about as descriptive as if I tell you imagine a detective, you have no, I don't know, I imagine someone off the TV, I suppose. But there are various different things that come under the broad umbrella of epidemiology. There are a huge number of different tools which people use, be they going out and interviewing people from certain communities or with certain experiences, be they sitting behind computers, as lots of us do, with vast wealths of data. At its core, often what we are trying to do is we are trying to compare groups who have had what we're going to call an exposure, and I'll give a couple of examples in a second, of something with groups who have not had that exposure. And that exposure could be something social, it could be something like poverty, something potentially political, something behavioral like exercise or smoking. It could be something environmental like air pollution. We want to see whether that's causing something. Or as is often the case in our work, it could be something like a modifiable medical treatment, like drugs or like a given medicine. And what we want to do is we want to compare the people who have been exposed to that thing with people who have not, and see whether they are different with respect to any number of things that we are then subsequently interested in later on. So, some common comparisons which people tend to use is something called case control. This is I was going to say recent, relatively recent, somehow relatively recent, and also a million years ago when the COVID-19 pandemic happened. people we were very quickly thrust into this situation where there was a disease or a virus which was proliferating throughout the population, and we wanted to know what things were likely caused by COVID-19. So you would go out and you would ask people, if you have this thing, can we compare you with someone who doesn't have it? The issue with that kind of study is that you only have information on people since you decided that that thing was worth studying. So the you sometimes have issues with what's called recall, where the only information you have on people prior to this recruitment is their own memory of it, and my own and everyone else's memory is unfortunately fallible. So people then instead use something called a cohort study, which is where you collect a bunch of people and you follow them up over a long period of time, and you collect information on a whole heap of things prior to any given condition emerging. So, and this is prior to a pandemic happening or prior to rare conditions evolving in that population, because then you can study stuff from before that thing appeared. And those are some of the things that are going to be spoken to you a little bit about later today. I know Laura's going to speak about these a little bit. This final point, so this is I'm not going to rabbit on for too long, but the the process of deciding all of those things that I've talked to you about now assume that we are we all have tools which make us pretty good at answering questions. We are pretty good at getting the answer to a given question, but it's not particularly, or it hasn't been particularly transparent in previous research how it is that we decide which questions are worth answering. And that's something that's really, it's important both in terms of how we direct resources, important, from a democratic perspective of needing people's oversight over the sort of research that they fund, as is often the case. So we might prioritize things based on prior evidence. What has been researched before? What do we know about a given condition? Or the scientific consensus? What does everybody largely think is important right now? Should we prioritize those things? But then there's this thing which has always really been at the core of this, but has become more foregrounded recently with a series of interventions and innovations and moves from research funders, is that actually all of these things are really sort of secondary to the ideas and the experiences of people who are affected by given things, people who have what we would call lived experience of a given condition or certain experiences that we are interested in. And this so that there has this motivating principle come out of this stuff, which is that actually all of these people are people who have historically been studied, but haven't necessarily been in the fold of people who are doing the studying, doing the research. And there was a bunch of, to my knowledge, it comes out of disability activism in the sort of late 90s and early 2000s, this idea of, I hope this works as an animation. Nothing about us without us is this idea that people who are affected by something, we shouldn't be doing research on them without having them involved in the research process. And that's really where the core of this idea of PPI, which you'll hear a lot later, which means patient and participant involvement, is trying to get people who have lived experience of a thing that we are studying involved in the research design itself, telling us what we should be looking at, giving us feedback on how we do it. And that is something that I hope has come across. That is something that's really important and is really important to all of us. I'm going to shut up now, I think, and I'm going to hand back over to Sean, and you can ask me some questions if you want. And if you don't want, I will not take it personally.